Well, I guess you couldn't have missed it. Last week it was hot, really hot, and we had to act quickly here at the nursery to save, well, everything we could. So there was no time to make videos last week, but today I'm going to tell you everything we put in place to be able to keep working normally, how we saved our crops, how we saved our plants and our nursery. Come on, get your hats out, let's go. Well, we'll start with the crops in the ground, the garden. Actually, that wasn't the hardest part to manage. The toughest thing was really the potted plants, especially in the greenhouse. We'll get to all that later. We'll begin with the easiest part, the crops that have been in the ground for a while. In this case, there weren't too many problems. I have to say, I'm really lucky here in Masak compared to where I was before. The soil here is deep, good quality, and rich in organic matter, so it retains water well. Most of our crops were well watered. However, this is the first time I've experienced such an early heat wave in May. We've never had that before. And the advantage, quote unquote, of this kind of heat wave is that at this time of year, the groundwater levels are still quite high. We have a well here on site in the garden, which in the middle of summer during a drought will give about 1 cubic meter per day. That's roughly enough for a small garden. Here, for a nursery and these crops, it's just enough. But in May, groundwater levels remain high. So, we've been watering a lot this week because of the heat wave and the well hasn't run dry. So on that front, it's pretty cool, but be careful. I'm not saying it's good to have a heat wave in May, I'm just saying it's cool. At that point, we have water in the well and can manage. Having a heat wave this early in the year is really scary. What will happen in June, July, August and September? We're not at the end, we're just beginning and it's already getting tough. We managed to water, but it's still not reassuring. We'll see how we adapt. So, to get back to the crops, for the well-established crops, they held up well. For the more recent plantings, the tomatoes, the cucumbers, the zucchinis, the things we just put in the ground. Quite recently, we urgently put up some shade like this little cover above me and crates placed over the small plants. And then that's really just for emergencies, and then for the slightly longer term, well, I planted a lot of plants that will provide shade for the crops like corn, sunflowers, plants that can withstand full sun, and as they grow, they'll provide shade for my other crops. So obviously these shade plants will need time to establish themselves and it's not going to happen right away. It's not this week that they're going to give us shade. But like I said, having a heat wave now in May, it's not very reassuring for what's to come. So I tell myself, once these crops have grown well, this summer they should provide some shade for my vegetable crops. And besides that, there's something I've already been doing for a long time anyway. It's that for most classic vegetable crops like tomatoes, zucchinis and so on, I'm not going to plant in full sun like it used to be recommended, but rather in partial shade. I'm going to put trees, fruit trees, as much as possible all over the garden to create shade, or at least to make my vegetable crops grow in partial shade and not in full sun. So, another little tip, as you can see in this area, I'm testing a new technique that I think has a lot of potential, and I'll tell you more about it in detail in an upcoming video. I'm not sure if you recall the technique popular with permaculturists known as mound gardening. Personally, in case of drought, or even when there's no drought at all, I don't find it logical at all. Growing on a mound, first of all, the slope makes it impractical to cultivate. When you water, well, the water will run down to the bottom and water the base of the mound, but not the top. And then as it runs off, it causes erosion that brings all the organic matter, or at least the nutrients, down to the bottom of the mound. So, in short, I just don't find it logical. To be clear, I'm not entirely dismissing the mound technique. In certain contexts, with certain types of soil, making mounds can be interesting, but in most soils, I find it much more logical and much less restrictive to grow on flat beds, on flat plots, as is traditionally done in market gardening. What I'm developing here is, well, the opposite of a mound. I'm going to call it an anti-mound. Give me some ideas, let me know if you have any. But the idea is to dig down below ground level to take better advantage of the moisture. So, for a lot of different reasons here, for me. Here the hollow is made right at the drain where we have a sink to wash our vegetables, and the water drains down and floods the whole area, and being lower than ground level, so we'll have more moisture deeper down and the air currents will be less drying than if we were on flat ground, or even worse, on a mound. So that's how we'll keep a bit more moisture thanks to this. That being said, just like with mounds, this will be practical in certain situations. If you have soil that's not deep enough, you'll have a hard time digging like I did here. I enjoy experimenting and trying new techniques. I'll make a short video soon to present the project in more detail, followed by a results video at year's end to discuss what was produced. That's all for in-ground growing. Now let's move on to other topics. The hardest thing to manage this week, well, the most complicated thing to handle this week was the potted plants, among other things. We have a lot, right? With plants for sale, those in production, mother plants in the greenhouse, and seedlings, many have suffered mostly from watering issues. Some well-rooted potted plants dry out quickly, requiring watering once or even twice daily. And for all the plants we have at the nursery, between the ones we have for sale and the ones in production, here my mother plants in the greenhouse. Well, we spend 1 or 2 hours a day watering, so it was pretty complicated with the heat wave. Watering, soaking, there's a lot to manage because of that. And even when they're well watered, some fragile plants, maybe basil, bean seedlings, lettuce, there are things that are a bit delicate. Which ones? In the greenhouse during a heat wave, when there's no wind, the temperatures can go over 40, 45 degrees. Sometimes it's higher in unventilated areas. Even well-watered plants can overheat at those temperatures, so managing it was complicated. So the goal was to, well, first reduce the watering time, and then why not especially try to reduce the number of potted plants we have to manage at the nursery. So for that, well, several techniques. First, reduce the number of potted plants we have for the perennial plants we keep as mother plants or that we're keeping to sell later in the year. Well, we put as many plants as possible in the ground. So this week we got up very early in the morning to take advantage of the coolness and plant as much as we could. That took time since planting is slow and you must prepare the soil first. In the areas that are a bit dry, we had to flood the zones, loosen the soil, prepare, plant. Well, anyway, it was quite a lot of work, but the heat wave is calming down a bit now. And anyway, every plant put in the ground is time saved later on, so there you go. Well, I don't know about you, but it's already coming along nicely. As for the plants that will be sold a bit later in the season, there's another technique which I had already used by accident before, but now I'm developing it a bit more intentionally, let's say. These are areas where the soil is prepared, loosened, leveled, and fed a little with compost. And the pots are simply placed on the ground with the goal that the roots will go through the pot and into the soil underneath. So we water a little at the beginning to encourage the roots to go down, and then once the plants, or rather the roots, are well established in the soil, there will be less need to water, so that's time saved. Well, we did this for the grapevines, which root really quickly and strongly, so I'll tell you later how it went, but I don't really have any doubts about it. And then, for the annual plants, we still have a few of them here for sale at the nursery. Well, the goal is to be able to sell those a little later in the season. We're going to repot them into bigger pots so they need less watering. Even though the goal is still to sell them now as quickly as possible, or even for some plants to just give them away. And yes, because when we have weather like we had this week, there are quite a few people, gardeners, who get a little discouraged about gardening, or at least want to plant a bit less. And since we produce some things in fairly large quantities, there are things that I know at the end of the season, pots, things that we'll be stuck with, and I know we won't be able to sell them. So, well, we give a lot of gifts to people who come to the nursery, so if you want some gifts, well, this might be a good time to come see us. Alright, and now about this repotting thing, because I said there are things we're going to try to repot. So, it's all well and good to say we're going to do that, but it's going to be pretty complicated to manage. Not sure if you noticed how hot it was this week, but I don't know if you can imagine what it's like inside a greenhouse. With this kind of weather, like I was saying, we can have temperatures that go well over 40 degrees. And so, in order to keep working properly, comfortably, I moved my nursery under the trees. So when I say move, I'm talking about the plants, but I'm also talking about the whole greenhouse infrastructure. So I didn't take apart the tables and everything I had built inside. I just, for now, put together something a bit temporary outside. So, the work tables, the soaking bins, the storage bins. In short, I rebuilt everything so I could work in the shade under the trees. And I have to admit, the coolness here, well, it's not unpleasant at all. So it took me, well, the whole week to do this. I got overheated a few times, but now at least I can keep going. I can get back to repotting calmly. Even if it gets hot again later, right now the heat wave has calmed down a bit, but even if it gets hot again later, I can keep working comfortably. So it's been a year, as I was saying. I've been making videos for you for a year now about how I'm setting up my nursery in the greenhouse, only to realize now that it's too hot. So, well, it makes you think about how we're going to set things up. Well, I didn't do all that work in the greenhouse for nothing. There are times when we'll be working in the greenhouse, we'll improve the shade, maybe plant more trees near the greenhouse to create shade over it. But I'm thinking, why not have 2 work areas, each adapted to a different time of the year? The 2 work areas are very close to each other. The other work area is barely 10 meters away from me here. The storage areas for pots and potting soil are just between the 2 work areas. So once this area is well set up, it won't be complicated to move from one area to the other. So yes, there are still plenty of ways to improve. And by the way, let me know in the comments, I'm really interested to know, Well, how did you manage with this heat on your end? How did you save your plants or your crops? That's one thing, but how do you personally deal with it? With this heat, how do you keep working comfortably? Because we can manage to work in the heat, but the idea is still to enjoy what we're doing and keep having fun with it. So, there you go. Tell me, how do you manage to deal with all of this? All right, now that all of this is done, that's cool. I can get back to work on my end, calmly, and I can also start making videos again in a more relaxed way. And well, that's it. I've reached the end of this video. Thank you for watching this far. As usual, you can share, subscribe, give a thumbs up, comment on the video, all that stuff. It's really nice. It makes me happy. And for those who want to support me financially, you can do so through the Typee platform. I'll put the link over there at the end of the video, in the description below the video. So if you want, you'll find it. Thank you to everyone who does it or who will do it, without whom I wouldn't be able to keep taking the time to do all this. So thank you all, and I'll see you very soon for the next video. Bye.